Okay, hi, my name's Mariah. Um, for those of you who don't know me, now you can put a face to a name. Um, so for my midterm, I decided to choose the chapter about why kids lie. Because, who doesn't want to know why people lie? Um, Something that I learned from the chapter was um, more of a interesting fact. I work with children fairly regularly. I help in the children's ministry at my local church. Um, and so I am exposed to kids and interacting with them fairly often. Um, One of the things that I experience in watching these kids, seeing them grow and interact with each other, is if they lie or if they don't. If they lie willingly or if it's more unintentional. Um, Something that I learned from this chapter was how kids will determine whether or not to lie, um, based off of how their parent or caregiver interacts with them. Does the caregiver, specifically in my case, do I ask them a question more aggressively and that's why they lie, or is it because they just want to make me happy? How does that play into how I can interact with them? Something else I found interesting was a couple of statistics that they listed was how kids begin to tattle at 14 months old, where they're starting to learn good versus bad, and then later on how we suppress that, don't tattle on kids or people, um, and how we label that as being bad when in all reality it's one way we tell the truth. How are we supposed to tell the truth if we're being told not to tell the truth? Um, the Some of the experiments that were conducted throughout this study I thought were interesting as well. One particularly involving Nick, a little boy, I think it said 6 years old, who played games and received prizes when he won or when they were done playing. And um, his dad was so confident that he didn't lie, or at least not that much. He was sure that his son did lie, but he would still be surprised. And then later on, he found out, oh, his son lied fairly frequently, um, while playing games and afterwards when asked if he had cheated or not. Um, Something that I found interesting was conducting these experiments and learning how kids lie also influences how often the child lies. It's a reward and discipline system. If the child is constantly rewarded for doing bad, then aren't they just pushing um, the very topic that they're studying? Like, I know they're doing it for research purposes. I just thought it was kind of interesting overall. Um, Nonetheless, those were a couple of things that I learned. Is the three main reasons why kids lie, because of their own involvement. They want to keep themselves protected. They want to make other people happy, and then we consistently teach them um, to lie. So I thought those were kind of interesting. Um, I have the list of questions here. That's what I'm looking at. So, what would we be interested in from this chapter? I think the overall chapter is fairly interesting and something that we'd all be interested in. Um, Knowing how kids interact with us, why they lie, what determines or dictates why they may lie. Um, Step one, two, three, basically, the process, what goes through their head cognitively, why socially that would influence whether or not they lie to people. I think that would all be something that we're interested in. Another thing I thought would be interesting was the study done on Nick and determining if he would lie. The second part of the study was he had to guess the toy that the researcher was sounding off. And if he guessed all three toys right, then he would receive a prize. First one he got right off the bat. Second one he had a little trouble with, then got. And then the third one he was stumped with. It was a stuffed soccer ball and a music playing card. Well, when the researcher left the room momentarily, Nick peeked when he wasn't supposed to and turned back around. He knew what it was. It was a soccer ball. The researcher continued on as if nothing had happened and accepted Nick's reasoning as to why it was a soccer ball, how it sounded black and white. But then when the same study was done on kids in Western Africa, from a school there, the punishment system made this kids not less likely, but made the kids take longer to peek, but just as many kids peeked to see what the toy was. That was just another thing I kind of thought was interesting that maybe everyone would think was interesting. In Western Africa, in the book, it explained that teachers would physically punish their students for doing something wrong, slap them across the back of the head, pinch them, and stuff like that. I thought it was just interesting, and I know that's more than likely influenced by the culture, but it still feels and sounds morally wrong to me, but that's kind of how I was raised too. Something that I feel like I would change as a result of having read this is how I interact with children. Like, specifically if I know they have done something wrong and I'm trying to get them to admit to it. One thing I want to do is be able to kind of dictate whether or not to be assertive or aggressive in how I ask if they have done something wrong or if it was their fault. Give them less of a reason to lie to me. Be more of a friend, a mediator, rather than an opponent, so to speak. I think that's something that's going to be very important, and just being more aware of, okay, this is why, or this might be a reason why this child is lying to me. Now I can be more aware, and that's something I want to implement, is just being cautious of that and how my reactions affect the outcome of their response, so to speak.